But I had a lot of, my family was absolutely wonderful. I'm one of 6 children, and the reason I learnt to swim was because when my father was demobbed, he loved just swimming. I mean, not competitive, but he loved swimming. He used to take me to a swimming pool in Ilford every Saturday night, come rain or shine. We would go to the swimming pool and we'd swim, and I used to, well, I didn't realise, but I didn't know diving existed, and I used to do all these, I used to run along the side and throw myself off backwards and things like that. And my trainer saw me, and you can usually see the potential in children of, you know, certain sports, and he asked my father if he could coach me, and that's how it all started with me. I think he sort of saved my life, really. I think I would have some of the things that I did, but that is how I started diving, whereas now there are all these clubs, and the young children have got, they've got places they can go, and in schools they do so much more now, don't they? They, you know, so if they see somebody who has got the potential for any sport, they can direct them into these places. So I think with the Olympic Games looming, and with the diving stage and the swimming and the athletic stadium and everything being so central at Stratford, and it'll be on the news so much, I think, you know, if the schools can get involved and if the clubs can get involved, I think it's absolutely marvellous that it's there.
You mentioned the amateur status.
Yes.
What's your view on sports such as basketball and tennis now being part of the Olympics, when obviously the professionals taking part?
Yes, it's mixed feelings really, but then if you are willing to devote your whole life to your sport, then I suppose it's so different, isn't it? And everybody is the same then. Everybody is the same now. Everybody can do a sport, devote their life to it, whereas, again, I'm not saying it was wrong in my day. It wasn't wrong at all, because it was a different way of, sport was in it was a different way of living, as everything is a different way of living. In my day, it was very different. You had to go to work in order to, you know, so therefore it was a hobby. And you did your sport because you loved it. Whereas now, it's your, I mean, you hear people on the television actually saying, well, this is how I earn my money, this is how I've got to do it, and you think, oh, you know, I look at it and I think, oh, what a shame that they have to say that, because the only reason I did it was because I loved it, and for no other reason. I loved winning, don't get me wrong, I mean, that was the icing on the cake, but I still absolutely loved doing it, and nothing would stop me doing it. Yes.
So when was the first time you were picked to compete for your country, and how did that come about?
And now that was, funnily enough, the Wembley Games in 1948, I was interested, I used to love, so my friend and I, we used to get on a train. Now bearing in mind I was 10 years old, and we used to get on a train and we used to go to Wembley, and we used to, sometimes we were lucky enough to have a ticket, so we used to get in and sit. But then after that was over, after that, you know, the ticket session was over, we knew of a door on the ground floor that we could sort of get into and get onto poolside. So we used to do that. We used to get in and get onto poolside, and we used to spend the whole day there and watch all the diving in Wembley, because that was the last time that Wembley was a swimming pool. They closed it after that to be an ice rink. So I used to go and watch the Wembley, watch the Olympic Games at Wembley. Now I was 10 then, so in about 1949, I was in my first national championships. Now there were no junior championships in those days. We had to dive, so I was, 11, 12 years old, something like that. So in 1949 I went into my first national championships, but the ladies who dived in the 48 games still competed then. So I was third, so there was Edna Child, Kay Cuthbert first and second, who were women who were in the Olympic Games, and I was third. But then after that, they retired. So in 1950, we youngsters and of course I won then. That's when I started winning the national championships, and of course I won a national title for 10 years on the trot in 1950. So I think I was chosen. We had trials, of course, and I went to my first international diving competition in a place called Oberhausen in Germany, and I was the youngest, obviously, there. It was all bomb damage. We used to think that England was bombed, but my goodness me, it was bombed. Anyway, I was in Oberhausen, and that was, I think, 1950 or 1951, my first international diving competition then. Yes.
And did you have to qualify for the Olympics, or you were
Oh
selected?
yes, very hard, yes. Even now, I mean, it's a similar process to now. To get, this is what a lot of people, I do have to put a lot of people right, because they watch the Olympic Games and somebody comes, say in my time, they say, oh, you came fifth, you know. And you think, now listen, that person who has got into the Olympic Games, to start off with, they have got to achieve a certain time or a certain number of points to get into the trials. I mean, you don't just say, look, I want to have a go. You have to get into the trials. So to achieve that, they have so many different competitions during the year where you can achieve those points all the time. Then you go into the trials. Now, having gone into the trials, they usually have at least 3 trials before the Olympic Games, and again, you have to show what you can do. You either have to win or whatever, and then you are still judged. They still say, well, yes, okay. Because I know with my Oberhausen experience, they only wanted me to dive highboard. Now, I used to dive highboard and springboard. I did 3 metre. There was no 1 metre championship. It was just 10 metre platform and 3 metre springboard. And I had to write a letter and say, well, please let me, please consider. I have got the points and I did win the trials. Please let me, and they did. They let me dive in both. But it's very hard to even get to the Olympic Games, let alone compete. And then, of course, as you know, you've got all these countries competing, so to get into a final is stupendous. Nobody knows how hard, unless you're actually competing, you don't know how hard it is. Just I'll tell you, in Helsinki, to start off with, we had a 10 dive program you had to do. So in Helsinki, there were, I think, to start off with, at least 40 divers from different countries. There were 40 divers. So you did 3 dives. The first 3 dives, you did your first 3. Now, after those first 3 dives, only 12 went through to do their next 3. Okay? So you can imagine how close it was. You've got 40 divers, and only 12 of those came out of there and went in to do their next 3. So then you did your next 3, and then out of those 12, the last 8 went into the final. Now, and it was jolly, so to even get into a final was absolutely, and that was the same in all my diving career. So you can imagine how hard it was even to attain. I mean, if they'd have done it, say, backwards and done the last 3, probably a different 8 would have got through. You had to be so good and so consistent, and it was so hard. And I don't think people realise when they watch the Olympic Games and they watch these elite competitors, they don't know what they've had to go through just to get there. Just to get there. You know.
And how did you find the whole experience of being in the Olympic Village in 52?
Well, of course, that's very different now. I mean, in Helsinki, the women were in a converted hospital. We were in a hospital. In Melbourne, Australia, we were in a housing estate which hadn't you know, just being built. And again, you see, it was wonderful because they used to have people on the gate to make sure that the men didn't get into the women's and the women's didn't get into the men's, and people, you know, were all right, they were quite safe. But that was the only reason. We didn't have soldiers with guns and, you know, to protect us and things like that. But we were in a, as I say, and then in Rome, we were in a village. In Rome it was an Olympic village, and again it's great because you see all the other competitors and you meet them as people, not, you know, you meet them for breakfast. And every my memories of Rome were that there were different tents for different food, so you could, my friend and I, we used to go and test out all the different foods. It was great. It was great.
Do you remember meeting any particular athletes from other countries or other British athletes?
We met them all. Yes, we could meet them, as I say, on a daily basis. Yes. We were very, very friendly with all of the competitors. It was nice meeting, and in my sport, I don't know what it's like so much with the others, but in my sport, divers last much longer, if you know what I mean. So I was in the 1952 games. Now I would meet some of the divers that were there in 4 years' time at the next one. So we would be able to catch up on each other and, you know, sort of, what have you been doing, and have you got married, and all this, that and the other, all the personal little bits and pieces. So it was nice, yes, we could catch up with all of them. And I have remained friends with quite a few of the divers that I competed against. So that was nice.
And you mentioned before that you didn't receive much support. Did the support increase as you went from 52 to 56 to 60, or was it still that you still had to do it off your own back with the training?
No, I think it was still about the same. The officials were very much the officials, and the competitors were definitely the competitors. You know, I mean, when we went to national championships, the officials stayed in the Cliffs Hotel in Blackpool, and we competitors found a sort of cheapy bed and breakfast for 12 and 6 a night, and you know, and that's what we had to do, which is very different now. Because I remember one of the officials, when I decided to retire, one of the officials came up to me and said, shouldn't you be putting back into the sport something that you got out of it? And I was very cross and very hurt at that, because I thought, when I was competing, I put everything into the sport. Everybody knew my name. You could go to any country in the world and say Anne Long, and they knew my name. I always competed well. And the teams, we always behaved ourselves. And it was one in the opening and closing ceremonies, we got such an ovation. You know, the British team were right at the top there with popularity and everything. And I thought to myself, I worked jolly hard, you know, to do what I did. Yes, I did put into the sport. I can retire when I want to. I can do what I, you know. That was quite a hurtful remark, really, from the officials. But I think they now, I think the officials, I don't know, but I would imagine that they realise, and seeing it on television,